God, He is Lord, He is Adonai.
Okay? Yahweh. Number 3.
We have no souls. We are animate men. Our sense of having a self or soul is an illusion.
Absolutely. Good Buddhist teachings on and Atman. We have no soul. Number 4. Are we up to 4?
Our souls are Atman, which is identical to Brahman.
Good. So the Hindus say, no, we do have a soul. It's called Atman, and it's the same as this other religious reality known as Brahman. 5.
We are not reincarnated after we die. We die and face judgment and go to heaven or hell.
Okay. 6.
We are reincarnated after we die. We keep living until we reach Nirvana.
Okay. Maybe we are reincarnated until we reach Nirvana. Maybe we are not. And there's judgments. Up to number 7.
There is only one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet.
This is what Muslims are essentially required by the faculars to recite at least once a day. This is their belief. 8.
Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva represent the divine. I don't know what the truth is.
Yes, they represent the divine. And you know what? Here's my tip. When you come across in like classes or any setting, and there's these words that you're not quite sure how to pronounce them,
Say it with confidence.
just say it with confidence and move on, and nobody's going to call you out on it. Good. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, within Hinduism, representing the divine. Number 9. Anybody have 9? Little slips of paper. No 9? Oh, that's unfortunate. Did I forget? Well, I have a backup copy. No, we already did 9. Yahweh is God, He is Lord, He is Adonai.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay.
So which one did you read? Which one did you read?
So did we skip one?
I'm sorry, that's my fault.
2.
What was 2?
Apparently I can't read.
How about number 2?
There's another 2 back here.
Okay, I
Yeah,
messed up.
sorry, that's
Okay,
my
so
fault.
read the other 2.
God is not a personal being. God is just a name for some impersonal force or power.
Excellent. If I can count right, how about number 10?
Krishna is God.
11.
Shiva is God.
12.
God is a Trinity. You can only come to God the Father through Jesus Christ.
Alright, so this is just 12. And there are many, many, many others that we could put on here. Right? These are claims that different religions make. People who adhere to these religions put forward any number of these claims. And it shows real deep differences in these religions of the world. I mean, is God... Well, first of all, of course, is the question, is there a God or not? Right? Is there anything religiously in existence or not? Right? Do the atheists have it right? But if there is this religious reality, is this religious reality personal or impersonal? Can't be both. What is our ultimate destiny? Reincarnation? No reincarnation. How do we get the truth? Where is the truth found? Is it in the Torah? Is it in the Bible? The Quran? Is it in the Hindu Vedas? Right? Confucian Analect? Where do we find truth? And really, in the end, there's 3 fundamental questions about religion, about life, about anything that matters. And each religion often answers these 3 questions differently. 1, what is wrong with human life? 2, what's required of us if we are to become free of what is wrong? 3, of what does our salvation or liberation consist? What's the problem? What's the human predicament? What's required of us to get out of that predicament? And what does that look like more clearly? This salvation or liberation or release look like? So on a logical level, it is simply impossible for all of these religious claims to be true in what they declare about divine reality. Human existence, right? What do they say about that? What do they say about salvation? Not just different things, but contradicting things. They say incompatible things. When we die, again, we'll either be reincarnated or we won't. And, some religions simply have false beliefs. Islam says Jesus was a prophet, but not God. Christianity says Jesus was God. One of those two claims is wrong. Of course, they could logically both be wrong, but at least one of them is wrong. They can't both be true. And so when we hear these literal proclamations about reality, we know that not all religious claims can be true. But some years ago, there is a study by a Barna group, and what they found is 43% of Americans believe that all religions teach basically the same things. 48% of Americans believe that all roads lead to God, and the way different surveys use these terms, it's usually the respondent self-identifying as born again or evangelical or anything like that. So you never know quite exactly what they mean, but 26% of people who self-identified as born again Christians also believe that all roads lead to God. Right, so is that surprising, or does that sound about right? Anyone surprised by this?
What does it mean by all roads?
You take an agnostic path, you take a Buddhist path, this other person leads a Christian life, someone else just gets involved in New Age spirituality, and everyone's going to work out fine in the end after they die.
They all go to the same place, you mean?
Yeah. All roads, all ways of life will be fine.
I sort of agree, because I think it was Augustine who said that all truth is Christian truth. If it's claimed to be truth, then it has to be Christian truth, because only truth can come from God or the Word.
What about those following paths that again, like we were just saying, either we're going to be reincarnated or we won't, right? And so one of those have to be false. So if you're following, and at false, whichever one happens to be false, if you're going down the false path, will that also work out just as well in the end? That's the question. So I think this is certainly worth thinking through. Yes?
I find it kind of surprising, because that's almost 50%. Yet, if that's true, then a lot of people are complacent in the fact that people want God taken out of so many things. And yet, so many people say, oh, we do believe that there is a God. It's just contradicting.
Right, yeah, and that's not the direction I'm going to go, but that's really a different way that we could look at this whole phenomenon. So here's some terms that we're going to talk about. Religious pluralist is someone who holds that all religions, or at least all major religions, are different paths to the same God, or ultimate reality. There are plural ways to get to the same good result. A religious exclusivist is one who argues or believes that there is only one way to God. Now, we probably just won't have time . Religious inclusivism would be a third option. Maybe we'll have time at the end to talk about that. There is this other view that essentially says, well, we'll see if we have time. But these are the two main options: pluralism and exclusivism. Right? Either multiple ways for essentially salvation, or to be right with the universe or the deity, or only one. So the first that we're going to look at is exclusivism, and myself as a Christian do side with what I see in the Bible, right? Which is that Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." In Acts, the Apostle Peter says, "There is no other name under heaven by which we must be saved." Right? These are exclusive claims. So let's look at some, I don't know how to describe it, hopefully it'll become clear, but things that are often taken to be wrong with exclusivism. Because even just the title, exclusivism, sounds so negative, doesn't it? And certainly in our culture it's taken to be something very negative. So let's think it through and see why perhaps it's not such a bad thing, or it's certainly not logically outrageous. So this, again, is this belief that well, first of all, it's just natural. If you think you have a belief that is true, then you would think that it is true across the board. You would naturally think that opposing views would, for instance, be false. So again, religions are exclusivistic. It declares that it alone is the path to salvation. So what about this familiar scene? This is I'm often sort of just amused and confused by what I call the familiar scene. And so this is where, perhaps an exclusivist thinks that he or she knows the true God and that other people are going to be lost, right? Maybe damned to hell or something like this, that they will not be saved unless they have faith in the one true God. And so they start talking to somebody, and if they're a Christian, as an exclusivist, perhaps they start talking to somebody about Jesus, say, hey, what do you think about Jesus? And maybe the other person doesn't really want to get into it, and they just say, something like, well, what do you think, I'm going to go to hell if I don't believe in Jesus? And they seem to be rather offended, and in more of an argumentative tone, right? What, do you think I'm going to go to hell or something? And then if the exclusivist Christian says yes, then the person really gets mad, really gets offended, and, just essentially berates the exclusivist as being so incredibly intolerant, narrow-minded, and certainly that other person won't listen to anything that the religious Christian exclusivist has to say. So why, though? Why is the other person so mad? And so what I would say is it's actually illogical for the non-religious person, the non-exclusivist, to be outraged or upset over someone who has an exclusivistic belief. Why? Why do you think, what are some reasons that seem to make, why does it make no sense for someone else to be mad at a belief that someone else has about exclusivism or how, I don't know if I'm asking the question right, but what do you think?
Because I feel like in human nature we want to be right, and they're saying we're not right, and so, and when you're told you're not correct, you sometimes you understand, and then it comes to an understanding, but then a lot of the time it's the exact opposite. You get mad and try to prove them wrong, or just get mad at the person.
So that really helps to show sort of the natural response of, hey, if somebody says you're wrong, then you can get defensive, you can get irritated. But when you really think about the issues, it actually doesn't make good sense. For instance, for a non-Christian to get mad that a Christian believes they're going to hell. Why? What do you
It's
think?
like different playing fields, like they're not arguing from the same point of view. It's like one's coming from a stance that like there is a God, and someone's arguing a different case of, or like it's not the same argument.
Yeah, right. Apples and oranges kind of, right? Other thoughts? Why it essentially makes no sense.
Sometimes they see it as like a personal attack when it's not exclusively talking about that person.
Right. To say that I believe this is true, and therefore, as a consequence, if you don't believe that I believe this will happen, it's not. It's taken as a very personal, judgmental, but maybe it is if the Christian is acting in a stupid way. But by itself, it's not a judgmental kind of thing about that person at all, really. But we can see how this is often seen to be the case. Other guests?
I think pluralism is kind of self-defeating in that it is an exclusive belief itself, because
And we're going to get there,
Right.
yes. But we're not, yes. So hang on to that thought.
Shut on. Go on.
So the non-Christian might be a pluralist, or they might just be an atheist. We're not sure at this point. So some of the reasons that it seems to make no real sense is that if the non-Christian has really thought about the issue, and they believe that there's no God, right, and they believe that we just live our life and we die and that's it, then they don't think there's a God, and they think they're justified in that belief. So who cares that somebody else thinks there is a God and that you're going to go to hell when you die? You think they're wrong, so why does it bother you? Logically, it it ought not. And then, think about the perspective of the exclusivist. And this is what, and I sort of assume that most in here are Christians, right? So as Christians, what ought to be the mentality? That we should seek to allow the others to understand. Well, what would it be? Why? Right? If the exclusivist thinks that another person would go to hell, the reason for telling them, one of the reasons, perhaps for telling them about Jesus or Christianity would be that perhaps you don't want them to go to hell. And perhaps the Christian thinks it's in their best interest to know God, that it will bring them perhaps some measure of peace and joy, a fulfilling life, happiness. And so they want to tell the other person about God, about God's love, in the hopes that they don't, for instance, go to hell. So, right, the non-exclusivist, the non-Christian, should hopefully be able to see that this person who's speaking about what they believe is just being consistent about their beliefs, and in the ideal scenario, acting actually out of compassion and love, rather than the judgmentalism. And that's what Christians really, really have dropped the ball on, and so often are too judgmental and do make it personal, when really the only real reason to share this idea about God, Jesus, the good news, right, the quote gospel, is out of compassion, out of concern, and to do so in a way that the non-exclusivist would understand. Hey, you're just acting consistently with what you believe. Perhaps they still disagree with you in the end, but there shouldn't be that hostile reaction. So next is the objection based on tolerance. The non-exclusivist will sometimes, just really rail, you're so narrow-minded, you're so intolerant, and they're very mad because the exclusivist, maybe the Christian in this case, won't accept everyone else's beliefs as true or valid. And so the non-exclusivist thinks that people ought to be tolerant in this way, and this similarly doesn't make much sense for the non-exclusivist to be mad, right? And here we get a little bit like, what is it, Justin? Is that, no? What?
Jaden.
Jaden was getting at, and a little bit closer to that idea. Right, the non-exclusivist is being just as exclusive, right? In the sense of saying, we ought to be tolerant of all views, logically would extend to being tolerant of the intolerant exclusivists, right? So anyway, I want to move on for time and just talk maybe about one of these analogies, this illness and medicine. If you were sick, you go to the doctor, and it's the dreaded news, cancer. And, one of your first questions is, how bad is this? Is it beatable? Is there a treatment? Is there any hope? And if the doctor says there's one medication, there's one treatment regimen, wouldn't we be glad to hear that? Would you, in your wildest dreams, start demanding that the doctor allow 2 or 3 different medical treatments to be just as effective? Would you get outraged and call the doctor narrow-minded and intolerant of other practices? If there is something truly wrong with humanity, if there's something broken in the world, in the cosmos, in the universe, and if God is loving, and if God is providing a way out, what is it other than arrogance to essentially demand that God cater to our wish to have multiple ways to be saved? I mean, we're not mad at the physician. Again, if there, just quickly, you can see the parallel. If you're in a building and there's a fire and there's only one exit, you're glad for the exit, right? There's just one way out. Well, great, there's a way out. Right? What, great. And so the mere fact that if God exists, as I think he does, and if Christianity is true, as I think it is, for that God to have provided Jesus as the means of escape. Great, wonderful, but isn't it just illogical to sit back and be mad at God for not allowing other exits from the building on fire? So anyway, Christianity is wide and it's narrow, right? The wideness is that it says it's open to all, everyone, right? Everyone. It is completely as wide and completely accessible to all. And the narrowness is simply that it says there's one medical regimen, right? There's one escape from the burning building. It's through Christ. It's through this thing called faith and trust. And so all of that is kind of the first piece here of what I wanted to talk about. With exclusivism, again, it often gets this bad reputation, and it doesn't seem logically to be problematic whatsoever. Pluralism, however, is often seen to be very good, very positive, very inclusive. But we do want to point out some negative issues with pluralism. So pluralist believes that all religions, all major historical religious views are different paths to the same God or ultimate reality. John Hick, a philosopher, and this text in particular from 1973 is very foundational to shaping a lot of culture's views on pluralism. And what he says here essentially is that each major religious tradition is a genuine response to the presence of the divine in human life. Each religion presents a way of salvation that is equally valid. All drugs, all chemo treatments, everything works the same. You can make your own door out of the burning building, it'll work just fine. Everything works. And so Hicks says that these are not rivals. You know, it's not Buddhism versus Hinduism versus Islam versus Christianity. That really it's the same divine reality that just manifests its way in such and such a way to the, Muslims. And the same divine reality is perceived as such and such to the Hindus. And that they're just different encounters with the same ultimate reality. And I mean, this is very attractive, right? I mean, on a personal emotional level, okay, we don't have to call them wrong. Okay, I don't really have to tell people what I think because, hey, everything's good. Right, and so Hick refers back to a Buddhist parable of 6 blind men and an elephant. Have you guys heard of this before? Right, so this is the pluralist view. Right, these 6 blind men, one blind person feels a leg, that's all they feel. And they say, this elephant is kind of like a great living tree. And another blind person is feeling the trunk, and that's all they feel. And they're like, this elephant, right, you call this an elephant. So what I'm experiencing, this seems to me like a great snake. And another person is feeling a tusk, and that's all they feel. And they say, this elephant seems to be like a sharp spear. And somebody's feeling the tail, and that's all they can feel. They can't see anything. They're like, okay, well, if this is an elephant, this seems like, a rope, something like this. The ear, like one of those great big Chinese fans. And they're all quarreling together, right? It's this. No, you're wrong. It's this. And the point of the parable is, it's all of it, right? It's all. They're all right. What looks to be sharp disagreements is not really disagreement, because yes, an elephant is partly like a spear, and it's partly like a snake, and it's partly like a rope, and the real picture encompasses all of it, right? The real truth is that they're really all right, but none of them has the complete truth. This is what among other things, what a pluralist would say. They're each referring to one limited aspect of total reality, just expressed from a different perspective. And so this is what the Buddha says: how can you be so sure that of what you cannot see? We are all like blind people in this world. We cannot see God. Each of you may be partly right, yet none completely so. So the point that the pluralist would have us take away is to say, look, we're just finite human beings. How dare we think we have it all figured out? Which, by the way, we shouldn't think we have it all figured out. Anyhow, we can't see God. We're blind men. what we feel is just part of the same infinite reality. And Hicks says it's probable that these many different accounts within the religions may all be true, but none the whole truth. So how should we respond? How do you think would be a good way to respond to an analogy like this? What do you think? Responses to a pluralist who says this is our position, we're just blind men.
I think the blind part that speaks with me, because obviously being blind is a pretty heavy metaphor used in biblical teachings. So I think these men are all blind. They don't know what they're talking about. That's what I think. But
Can't see what they're talking about.
that's a better way to say it.
Wait, what?
Can't see what they're talking about.
Okay, good.
Could be true, but is it plausible?
Okay. Question, right? Is it plausible?
They're all blind, so I mean, the fact that they're feeling that when they're blind, if they could really see, they'd see it is only one elephant, not the different part. But since they're blind and they're misguided by being blind, they're seeing it as different parts.
Right, so misguided, mistaken interpretations, right?
Maybe not mistaken. They're just taking what they can see and feel and interpreting it the way that they will.
Right. So so if we put only, it's only a tree. That would, it's completely like this. That would be mistaken. But if it's more of the humble claim, then yes, you're right. Because here's the thing. Hick, or the Buddha, whoever's, at any given time telling this type of parable, where are they? Where is the narrator? Where is the pluralist when he says this is what reality is like? What does the pluralist have to claim?
They're saying everyone's correct.
Yes, they're blind. They're correct in part, but nobody has the whole truth, except who?
Pluralist.
The pluralist. The only way this works is if a pluralist says everyone is blind, except me. No one has the full truth, except me. You are all wrong if you think this is the only way the world works. But really, I see clearly. Somehow I'm not afflicted by the same human blindness as everyone else. And listen to me, I'm telling you that it's not just a rope, it's not just a spear because I see more clearly than anyone. Which becomes an exclusive claim. It is just as exclusive as the exclusivist to say, the exclusivist says, God is like this. And somebody else says, no, God is like this. And you're wrong. And they say, no, you're wrong. And the pluralist says, you're both partly right, but you're both wrong about other things. Right? I have the answer. You have to be wrong in your exclusivistic claims, and I have to be right in my pluralistic claims, which amounts to simply a different form of exclusivism. Does that make sense?
So did you just disprove pluralism altogether? I'm like, whoa. This guy knows what's up, man.
Almost. I would say almost. Because here's the thing.
What would a pluralist say back?
Here's the thing. Could something like this be true? I mean, we could say logically, maybe. But here's the thing. If it was true, the pluralist wouldn't know it. If the pluralist claims it's true, then they are contradicting themselves by saying, I'm not blind, I have the full answer. All these other religions only have part of the answer. I put all the pieces together. I know the actual truth. And that claim is that claim is off limits now. So, if this were true, we would never be able to know it. And then there's one further thing along this line that I think does disprove pluralism. But what were you gonna?
I was gonna say the pluralist argument right back to that is gonna be like, well, in your book in the Bible, God has his prophets. How do you know that I'm not one of those kind of people? Just one of those one out of however many people that can actually see what I'm talking about and everything. So that's be kind of their argument back to that.
Right. And then you can look at the tradition, right? You know, within Hindu theology and tradition, but certainly within a Christian framework, there's going to be very clear responses to that from Christian scripture, certainly. So I mean, really, what is the pluralists doing in the end? They want to affirm all religions, don't they? They want to say, look, we're all right in part. But I mean, think about the things I had you read at the beginning. God is personal, God is impersonal. There is reincarnation, there is not reincarnation. They cannot all be right. They cannot. And ultimately, what the pluralist has to do is say these different names, right? Different names for the same reality. Adonai, Yahweh, Heavenly Father, Christ, Allah, Shiva, Krishna. All of these names, the pluralist has to say, are inaccurate representations of the same reality. And in the name of wanting to say all religions are right, the pluralist actually has to say they are all wrong. They want to say that they're all valid paths, but they can only say they're equally valid if they go further and say that as things stand, they have all gotten it wrong. And I think that's the most compelling piece of why pluralism seems to simply break down.
It's very obvious that you teach philosophy.
Good. Excellent. So we have a few minutes, not many. Questions, comments? What do you think? Practically, any questions on how to engage the issue?
I think our brains are so digesting all that.
Okay.
Let's talk about inclusivism.
Okay, so maybe inclusivism?
Like how would you, like someone who is angry, like what would you say to them? Like actually example
Why are you angry?
God, you're gonna go to hell when the person gets angry.
Okay, hey, what do you think about Jesus? What, do you think I'm going to go to hell? Well, I'd like to talk about this. No, just tell me, do you think I would go to hell? Well, yeah. Oh, I can't believe, and then just say, right, okay, you're clearly angry. Can you tell me why you find this so offensive? Because I'm not meaning to offend. I would love to talk about this, but it's clearly an emotional issue with you. Could you just tell me why? And frankly, people have trauma. People have been judged for wrong things. People have, hell has been used as this club to beat people down with in their own lives. And, maybe it's an abusive parent. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that in the name of religion. And so sometimes you do have to deal with life and show someone that you care, right? Because hopefully you do, and that's the reason you're talking to them in the first place. And say, okay, let's unpack what's behind your response here. And because for a lot of people, they don't even have the option of listening objectively until that's out of the way. So inclusivism, right, would sort of merit its own, 30 minutes and digging into, from a Christian point of view, how to deal with it. Inclusivism, basically, I'll read it from my notes, a pretty clear statement. So an inclusivist would say that one religion or path is the true one. Only one religion is ultimately valid. But perhaps individuals from other religions may still attain salvation by following paths laid out in those religions. Right? The Christian version would be like, yes, there is no other name under heaven by which we must be saved than Jesus. Yes, Jesus is the way, the truth, the life, and no one will reach heaven, presence of God, without going ultimately through Jesus. But perhaps, if you're a really sincere Buddhist, then after you die, you'll be shown the error of your way, and you'll believe in Jesus, and you'll still go to heaven through Jesus. But it wasn't in this life, right? And so it's like if you're sincere in your worshiping of Allah, if you're sincere in your Orthodox Judaism, then perhaps you'll get a pass. But ultimately, what you were believing was false, right? So the inclusivist says, yes, you were wrong, but it counts good enough. And that's inclusivism, saying there's one right answer, but salvation will include others from different walks of life. And again, I mean, obviously you can tell this would be a huge topic too, right?
More speeches, I guess.
What?
You'll have to do more speeches, I guess.
That's right, yeah. Have me back. I can try to unpack this. And logically here, what I think would need to happen is, logically, we might be at somewhat of an impasse. And so we would establish some baseline reliability of Scripture, right? So that then we would look to Scripture and say, okay, what does the Bible actually teach about heaven, hell, about different ways of living, and take that as God's revelation on some of these topics. And I think we could do that and just take. So exclusivism, logically, it's not nearly as negative as it's often made out to be. Pluralism looks great and inviting, but has deep logical problems.
I'm just wondering how those inclusivity even, like, how do they even get that idea? Because it's just contrary to itself and what they just said. They just said Jesus is the only way, and then they said, oh, you can come to Jesus after you're dead. But after you die, that's when you get, that's when.
Sure. And there's another class in here. We can keep talking. I have some free time after this, but it's 10 after. We should get going. But thanks for having me again.